I am Randy, 68 years old, and last month I returned from caring for my sister to find cardboard boxes scattered across my front lawn. My belongings spilled onto damp grass as rain threatened overhead. A note taped to my suitcase read, "Sorry, Mom. Wife's parents moving in. No room for you anymore." Stunned, I stared at the house I helped buy, key useless in my trembling hand. They never imagined I had a secret that would turn their lives upside down. Before I continue my story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments, and hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever been betrayed by someone you trusted. To understand why finding my possessions on the lawn felt like a knife to my heart, you need to know a bit about my life. For 35 years, I taught first grade at Roosevelt Elementary. The children kept me young at heart, even as my hair silvered and laugh lines deepened around my eyes. Teaching wasn't just a job, but a calling that filled my life with purpose and joy. 12 years ago, my husband Thomas collapsed while mowing our lawn on a sweltering July afternoon. A massive heart attack took him instantly, leaving me a widow at 56. Thomas was my high school sweetheart, the only man I had ever loved. After losing him, my world shrank to the size of our empty bedroom, his pillow still indented from where he last slept. During those dark days, my son Arthur became my lifeline. He was 30 at the time, working at an accounting firm downtown. Every evening after work, he would stop by with takeout dinners, fixing things around the house that Thomas used to handle, and sitting patiently while I sorted through the paperwork of death that follows losing a spouse. Arthur inherited his father's warm brown eyes and steady nature. When he hugged me, I could almost feel Thomas again. "You're not alone," Mom Arthur would say. "I'm going to take care of you just like Dad would want." Those words were a comfort then. How bitter they taste now. 7 years ago, Arthur married Diane, a marketing executive, with perfect posture and calculated smiles. At first, she made efforts to include me in their lives. Sunday dinners, holiday planning, even shopping trips, where she asked for my opinion on throw pillows and kitchen gadgets. I thought I had gained a daughter. "You have such classic taste, Randy," she would say. "I need your eye for these things." Looking back, I see how her warmth cooled over time, her invitations becoming less frequent, her smile not quite reaching her eyes when I arrived at their apartment. When Arthur and Diane decided to buy a house, I was thrilled to help. They found a lovely 4-bedroom colonial in Meadowbrook, a quiet suburban neighborhood with mature trees and good schools. The kind of place where children could ride bicycles in the street and neighbors still brought welcome baskets to newcomers. "Mom, we found the perfect place, but we're a little short on the down payment," Arthur explained, over coffee one morning. "The market is so competitive. If we don't put down at least 20%, we might lose it to another buyer." I didn't hesitate. "How much do you need?" The figure he named made my stomach tighten. $175,000, almost half of my retirement savings. But what else was I saving it for, if not for my only child's happiness? "We can do this one of two ways," I told him. "I can give it as a gift, or I can be part owner of the house." Arthur seemed uncomfortable with both options. "What if you lived with us? The house has 4 bedrooms. We could convert the first-floor den into a nice bedroom for you. No stairs to worry about as you get older." The arrangement seemed perfect. I would contribute to the down payment, have a place to live, and be close to any future grandchildren. We never signed any formal agreement. He was my son. We were family. Some things didn't need paperwork, or so I thought. What Arthur didn't know was that I had quietly worked with my financial advisor to structure the purchase properly. On paper, I owned 70% of the house. Arthur, 30%. My attorney, Patricia, had insisted on this protection, though I never mentioned it to Arthur or Diane. It felt unnecessary, even slightly insulting to their intentions. For 5 years, the arrangement worked reasonably well. My first-floor bedroom was comfortable if small. I tried to give the young couple privacy, often reading in my room or visiting friends when they entertained. I cooked 3 nights a week, cleaned regularly, and contributed to household expenses from my pension. I babied their golden retriever Jackson when they traveled. I planted a vegetable garden in the backyard and kept fresh flowers in vases throughout the house. Gradually, though, I noticed changes. Diane began making comments about having someone always around. Conversations would stop when I entered rooms. Arthur started coming home later. Diane's parents, Gregory and Helen, visited more frequently, staying for weeks at a time in the guest bedroom directly above mine. They were loud walkers, early risers, and Gregory had a booming voice that carried through the house. Still, I made accommodations. When they visited, I often stayed with my friend Barbara a few blocks away, giving them space. I never complained when dinner plans changed without notice, or when Diane rearranged my kitchen cupboards to her liking. Then came my sister Eleanor's hip replacement in Phoenix. What should have been a routine surgery led to complications. Eleanor, 4 years, my senior, lived alone and needed help during her recovery. I should be gone about 3 weeks, I told Arthur and Diane over dinner. Will you be okay without me? Diane's smile seemed unusually bright. Of course, Randy, take all the time Eleanor needs. Family first, right? Arthur nodded. Don't worry about anything here. Just focus on helping Aunt Eleanor. During my time in Phoenix, Eleanor's recovery progressed slowly. 3 weeks stretched to 4. I called Arthur regularly, checking on things at home. Everything's fine, Mom. Take care of Aunt Eleanor, he said, each time his voice cheerful but hurried. During my final week in Phoenix, Arthur mentioned that Diane's parents were visiting again. They're thinking about moving closer to us, he said casually. The Florida heat is getting to be too much for them. I packed gifts for everyone. A hand-painted tile for Diane, a book on Arizona wildlife for Arthur, even small souvenirs for Gregory and Helen. The taxi ride from the airport was filled with anticipation. Home. After a month away, I couldn't wait to sleep in my own bed to pet Jackson, to tell everyone about Eleanor's progress. As the taxi turned onto our street, I leaned forward, eager for the first glimpse of our cherry-red front door. Instead, what caught my eye made my heart stutter. Brown cardboard boxes. Stacks of them. On our front lawn. Ma'am, is this the right address? The taxi driver asked, slowing down as we approached my house. His eyes flicked to the rearview mirror, concern evident in his furrowed brow. Yes, I said, my voice suddenly thin. This is it. Rain drizzled from a steel-gray sky, droplets beating on cardboard boxes scattered across the lawn like abandoned children's blocks. The weather forecast had promised heavier rain later. My belongings would be ruined. I paid the driver and stood on the sidewalk as he drove away, taking in the humiliating tableau. My clothes spilled from split seams in overstuffed boxes. Books I had collected over decades sat exposed to the elements. Photo albums containing the only remaining images of my parents, my wedding day. Arthur's childhood. My life discarded on the grass like garbage. Taped to my wheeled suitcase was a typed note on printer paper, already wilting in the damp air. I picked it up, hands shaking. Mom, sorry for the short notice. Diane's parents lost their house and need to move in immediately. We've had to make some quick decisions and, unfortunately, there's no longer room for you. We've packed your essentials and changed the locks for security reasons, as there will be construction. We can arrange to have your remaining items in storage delivered wherever you land. Call when you found a place. Arthur. Cold. Businesslike. As if addressing a tenant being evicted, not his mother. Disbelief gave way to confusion. Surely this was a misunderstanding. I pulled my house key from my purse and approached the front door. The key slid in but wouldn't turn. They had actually changed the locks while I was away. I rang the doorbell, pressing it 3-4 times in succession. The chimes echoed inside the empty house. No one came. No movement behind curtains, no barking from Jackson. I checked my phone. No messages from Arthur warning me of this development. No missed calls explaining what I had found. I dialed Arthur's cell phone. Straight to voicemail. I called again. Same result. Arthur, it's Mom. I'm standing outside the house. My things are on the lawn. Please call me immediately. A car slowed as it drove past the occupants, staring at the spectacle of an elderly woman standing amid boxes in the rain. Heat rose in my cheeks. 68 years old, and here I was homeless. My dignity in tatters along with my soaked belongings. From across the street, Barbara emerged from her house, umbrella in hand. Barbara had been my friend since moving to the neighborhood, a fellow widow in her 70s with kind eyes and a no-nonsense attitude. Randy, what on earth? She hurried across the street, holding the umbrella over both of us. Did something happen? A pipe burst. Arthur, I managed, handing her the note. He's put me out. Barbara's face darkened as she read. That ungrateful little. Come on, let's get your things into my garage before they're completely ruined. For the next hour, Barbara and I moved box after box across the street to her garage. My arthritic hands protested pain shooting through my fingers as I lifted waterlogged cardboard. Some boxes disintegrated, entirely spilling contents onto the wet grass. We worked in near silence, the gravity of the situation settling over us like the thickening clouds above. When the last box was safely in Barbara's dry garage, we sat at her kitchen table. She placed a mug of hot tea in front of me, adding a splash of brandy from a bottle kept high in a cabinet. "Drink," she instructed. "Then we'll figure out what to do." The first tears came then, hot tracks down my cool cheeks. I remembered Arthur at 7 years old, gap-toothed and earnest, presenting me with a crayon drawing of our family. "I'll always take care of you, Mommy," he had said, his small hand patting my cheek, "even when I'm a grown-up." The bitter taste of betrayal filled my mouth. I had given Arthur everything, always putting his needs before my own. I had helped him buy the very house from which he had now ejected me, and he couldn't even face me while doing it. "I have nowhere to go," I whispered, the reality of my situation crashing down. "Everything I own is in your garage." Barbara squeezed my hand. "You'll stay here tonight. Tomorrow we'll make a plan." I tried calling Arthur again, still straight to voicemail. I sent text messages that showed delivered, but remained unanswered. Night fell and still no word. Until finally at 11:30 my phone rang. "Mom." Arthur's voice was carefully neutral. "You made it back from Aunt Eleanor's." The casual tone, as if nothing unusual had occurred, momentarily stunned me into silence. "Arthur," I finally managed, my voice steadier than I expected. "I came home to find my belongings on the lawn, in the rain, with a note taped to my suitcase." A beat of silence. "Then I know this is sudden, but we had to make some quick decisions. Diane's parents lost their house I finished for him, so you decided to make me homeless instead." I heard murmuring in the background, then Diane's voice suddenly came on the line. "Randy, I know this seems abrupt, but let me explain the situation." Her tone was practiced reasonable, as if addressing a difficult client. "My parents had to sell their house in Florida. The retirement community they invested in went bankrupt, and they lost almost everything. They literally had nowhere to go." "And I countered. "You're independent," Diane continued, undeterred. "You've always been so capable. Mom and Dad are in their 70s. They need family support." The irony wasn't lost on me. At 68, apparently I was too young to need family support, while Diane's 70-something parents were helpless victims requiring immediate rescue. Arthur's voice returned, placating. "Mom, we knew you'd understand once we explained. It's just temporary until they figure out their next steps." But their actions spoke otherwise, changing locks, moving my belongings out. These weren't the actions of people making temporary arrangements. "When did you make this decision?" I asked. Another silence. "We've been discussing it for a few weeks," Arthur admitted. Weeks. While I was caring for my sister, they had been planning to displace me. Each cheerful phone call, each casual "everything's fine here" had been a lie. "Why didn't you tell me before I came home? You let me find out like this. On the lawn in front of the neighbors?" "We didn't want to worry you while you were taking care of Aunt Eleanor," Arthur said, the excuse sounding hollow even to him, I suspected. Diane took the phone again. "There are some really nice retirement communities not far from here. We can help you look into them. You'd have your own space activities, people your own age." The suggestion stung like a slap. I had been living independently in my own home until they put me out. Now they were suggesting I needed assisted living. "I contributed $175,000 to buy that house." I reminded them, anger beginning to replace shock. "We had an agreement." "And we appreciate that," Diane said quickly. "But that was a gift, right? You've been living rent-free for 5 years." A gift. They had rewritten history, transforming my substantial investment in our shared home to a gift for which I should be perpetually grateful. "I've paid household expenses. I've cooked, cleaned, taken care of your dog. I've been a contributing member of the household." "And we appreciate all that," Arthur interjected. "But Mom, this is just how it has to be right now. My in-laws need us." "And I don't." The question hung in the air. "That's not fair," Arthur said, his voice hardening. "You know we care about you. But this situation is an emergency." An emergency they had been planning for weeks. I thought of all I had done for Arthur throughout his life. The college tuition I had scrimped to pay after Thomas died working extra summer school sessions to make ends meet. The $10,000 toward their wedding when Diane's parents' contribution fell short. The emotional support through every job change, every setback, every milestone. "You should want to help your son like he's helped you," Diane said, her tone suggesting she was being remarkably patient with an unreasonable person. "Arthur," I said, ignoring her, "I need a place to stay while I figure things out. Can I at least come back for a few days?" The silence that followed told me everything. "We've already converted your room," Arthur finally said. "The contractors started work while you were away." The final confirmation that this had been meticulously planned. They had begun erasing my presence before I even knew I was being removed. "Look," Arthur said, his patience visibly fraying, "either accept the situation or make other arrangements. But this is how it is now." Diane had one parting shot. "Honestly, Randy, it's probably for the best. With your health issues, it's good for you to find somewhere with proper support." My health issues? Mild arthritis and slightly elevated blood pressure. Hardly conditions requiring proper support. After hanging up, I sat in Barbara's guest room, sleep impossible. My mind replayed moments from the past 5 years, searching for signs I had missed. The gradual cooling of Diane's manner. Arthur's increasing absence. The comments about when you decide to downsize that I had interpreted as casual conversation rather than hints. My chest felt tight, each breath shallow. The weight of betrayal pressed down heavier than the boxes we had carried to safety. I had lost more than a place to live. I had lost my son. Morning brought no relief from the devastation of the previous day. My body ached from restless sleep on Barbara's sofa bed, joints stiff with both arthritis and shock. The rain had intensified, overnight drumming against the windows like an accusation. "Let's assess the damage," Barbara said, after breakfast, leading me to her garage. The scope of the destruction became clear in daylight. Many boxes had been packed hastily with little thought to protection or organization. Winter clothes mixed with summer. Kitchen items wrapped in single sheets of newspaper, many broken in transit. Books warped from moisture. But it was the personal items that broke me. A silver picture frame containing a photo of Thomas holding newborn Arthur, the glass cracked in a spiderweb pattern. My grandmother's hand-painted vase chipped at the rim. Pages of photo albums stuck together from moisture. "They didn't even use waterproof boxes," Barbara noted, her voice tight with anger on my behalf. As I sorted through the disorganized remains of my life, a terrible realization dawned. Several precious items were missing. "My jewelry box," I said frantically, searching through another container. "It's not here." Not just any jewelry box. The carved wooden case Thomas had given me on our 20th anniversary, containing my engagement and wedding rings, along with Thomas's wedding band that I had kept after his death. Pieces not valuable in dollars, but priceless in memories. Also missing my collection of journals dating back to college, the antique mantel clock that had belonged to Thomas's grandfather, the small collection of watches Thomas had carefully maintained throughout his life. My phone rang. "Arthur, did you find a place yet?" His voice was artificially upbeat, as if yesterday's conversation hadn't happened. "Arthur, there are things missing from my boxes. Important things." Like what he sounded, distracted voices and movement in the background. "My jewelry box with our wedding rings, Dad's watches, my journals. I'm sure they're in there somewhere. We packed everything from your room. They're not here, Arthur. I need to come check the house." A pause. Now isn't a good time. We're still getting settled with Mom and Dad Sanders. So formal. Mom and Dad Sanders. Not Gregory and Helen, as he had always called them before. "I need my things, Arthur. I'll be there in 20 minutes. Barbara drove me her silent support, a balm to my raw emotions. As we pulled into the driveway, I noticed new curtains already hanging in what had been my bedroom window. Diane answered the door, her face a mask of controlled politeness. "Randy, we weren't expecting you." She blocked the entrance, forcing us to remain on the porch like unwelcome solicitors. "Some of my belongings are missing," I said. "I need to look for them." We packed everything she insisted. If something's missing, it must have been lost in transit. From inside the house came the sound of heavy footsteps and Gregory's unmistakable laugh. They were already settled and enjoying the home I had helped purchase. "Is Arthur here?" I asked. "He's helping Dad move some furniture." Dad. The easy familiarity stung. "I'd like to speak with him." Diane sighed theatrically and called over her shoulder. "Arthur, your mother's here." "Your mother?" Not Randy. A clear delineation of territory. Arthur appeared behind Diane, looking uncomfortable. "Mom, hi. Can I come in and look for my missing items?" They exchanged glances, a silent communication from which I was excluded. Finally, Arthur stepped back, allowing me entry into what had been my home just 1 month earlier. The transformation was shocking. New furniture filled the living room. Family photos featuring Diane and her parents now dominated walls and surfaces. And my bedroom door stood open, revealing not the cozy space I had left behind, but a home theater setup complete with reclining chairs and a large-screen television. "You've been busy," I managed, fighting to keep my voice steady. "The contractors worked fast," Arthur acknowledged, not meeting my eyes. In that moment, I knew with certainty that this had been planned long before Diane's parents' financial troubles. The speed of the renovation, the completeness of my erasure from the home spoke of extensive preparation. I walked through the house, acutely aware of Helen watching from the kitchen doorway, Gregory standing possessively near the staircase. Every space had been reclaimed, repurposed, as if I had never existed there. "My jewelry box?" I asked again. "Dad's watches." Arthur led me to the dining room where a single box sat on the table. "We found these after you called. They were in the guest room closet." The box contained my jewelry case, thankfully intact, but several pieces were missing, including Thomas's wedding band. Only 2 of Thomas's watches remained in the collection. And my journals had been stacked haphazardly, several volumes missing entirely. When I pointed out the missing items, Diane's response was immediate and defensive. "We didn't take anything of yours, Randy. If things are missing, they were probably misplaced before we packed." But I had always been meticulous with these treasured possessions. The loss felt deliberate, a final severing of my connections to the home and family I had cherished. As Barbara and I prepared to leave carrying the small box of recovered items, I took one last look at the house. The red door had been repainted, a fashionable gray. New planters flanked the entrance where I had once tended colorful annuals each spring. Even the welcome mat had been replaced. In the car, the weight of everything crashed over me like a tidal wave. "They've erased me," I whispered. Barbara reached across to squeeze my hand. "They've tried," she corrected. "But you're still here, and you're going to figure out what comes next." But in that moment, huddled in the passenger seat with the small box of recovered memories on my lap, watching the house I had helped create recede in the side mirror, I couldn't imagine what next might look like. At 68, I was starting over homeless and heartbroken, discarded by the son I had given everything to protect and nurture. I allowed myself to break down completely, then sobs racking my body as Barbara drove in silence, understanding that some pain must be fully felt before healing can begin. The breakdown in Barbara's car marked my lowest point, but also the beginning of my journey back to myself. As the saying goes, sometimes you need to hit bottom before you can push up toward the surface again. That evening, after a day spent cataloging what remained of my possessions, I sat in Barbara's sunroom with a cup of tea, watching the last of the rain drift away as sunset painted the clouds in vivid orange and pink. "What will you do now?" Barbara asked gently. The question pierced through my fog of grief, demanding practical consideration. Where would I live? How would I rebuild at this stage of life? And then, like a light switching on in a darkened room, I remembered something I had almost forgotten in the shock of recent events. 8 years ago, after receiving a modest inheritance from my aunt, I had made an investment that Arthur knew nothing about. A 2-bedroom condominium in Riverview, the revitalized downtown area about 20 minutes from Meadowbrook. At the time, property values were rising, and my financial advisor had suggested real estate as a solid investment. "I never told anyone but Thomas," I said slowly, the plan taking shape as I spoke. "I own an apartment downtown." Barbara's eyebrows shot up. "You own property. Why were you living with Arthur and Diane?" It was a fair question. The truth was complicated. After Thomas died, the house felt too empty, too full of memories. When Arthur suggested I live with them, it had seemed like the perfect solution. The downtown apartment became an investment property rented to a series of tenants who provided steady income that I mostly saved. I wanted to be close to Arthur, to any future grandchildren. The irony tasted bitter, and I wanted to help them buy a house they couldn't otherwise afford. And now? The current tenant gave notice last month. She's moving to Chicago for work. The apartment will be vacant in 2 weeks. For the first time since returning to find my belongings on the lawn, I felt a flicker of hope. I wasn't homeless after all. I had options Arthur knew nothing about. The next morning, I called Patricia Henderson, the real estate attorney, who had helped me structure the house purchase with Arthur years ago. She agreed to see me immediately. Patricia's office exuded calm competence, from the organized bookshelves to the precisely arranged desk. In her early 50s, with sharp eyes behind stylish glasses, Patricia had been my attorney since Thomas died, helping navigate the complexities of widowhood with straightforward advice. They did what Patricia's professional demeanor slipped as I explained recent events. I showed her the note Arthur had left, still creased from being taped to my suitcase. Her expression darkened as she read. "Randy, I hope you realize that what they did isn't just morally reprehensible. It's legally questionable. You're an owner of that property. 70% owner, in fact." "I know," I said quietly. "I never told them about the legal arrangement. It never seemed necessary." Patricia leaned forward. "Let me get this straight. You contributed $175,000 to the purchase of the house. We structured it so you own 70% and Arthur owns 30%. They've now essentially evicted you from property you legally own the majority of." Put so bluntly, the situation seemed even more outrageous. "What are my options?" Patricia outlined several. I could demand to return to the house, asserting my legal ownership. I could negotiate a buyout requiring Arthur to purchase my share of the property. Or most drastically, I could force a sale of the house, which would require both Arthur's family and Diane's parents to find new living arrangements. "Think about what you want," Patricia advised. "Not just legally, but emotionally. What outcome would give you peace?" I spent the next days considering that question while organizing my move to the downtown apartment. The property management company confirmed the unit would be professionally cleaned after the tenant moved out. I visited to refresh my memory of the space: 2 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, an open-concept living and dining area with large windows overlooking the river, smaller than the house certainly, but entirely mine. During this time, Arthur called exactly once. "Just checking how you're doing," he said, his voice overly casual. "Found a place yet?" I chose my words carefully. "I'm making arrangements." "Great. I can help you move your things wherever you decide to go." Too little, too late. His offer of assistance now after the fact felt like an empty gesture to assuage his guilt. "That won't be necessary," I replied. "I've got it handled." "Mom, I know you're upset, but try to understand our position. Diane's parents needed help." And I didn't. The question remained unanswered. As I prepared for this unexpected new chapter, I reflected on the patterns I had allowed to develop in my relationship with Arthur. Since Thomas's death, I had prioritized Arthur's needs above my own, accepting scraps of consideration in return. I had enabled his increasing self-centeredness by never demanding the respect I deserved. That would change now. The day before moving into my apartment, I treated myself to a haircut. My silver hair, worn in the same practical shoulder-length style for years, was transformed into a modern, sophisticated bob that framed my face and somehow made me look years younger. I bought new clothes, not the practical, forgettable items I had worn while living in Arthur's house, but pieces with color and style that expressed something of who I wanted to be in this next phase. Small changes, perhaps, but symbolic of the transformation happening within. I was reclaiming myself after years of diminishment. On moving day, Barbara helped transport the salvageable remains of my possessions to the apartment. The space with its hardwood floors and abundant natural light felt welcoming. I arranged my books on built-in shelves, hung the few pieces of art that had survived the lawn debacle, placed Thomas's repaired picture frame on the bedside table. "It's lovely," Barbara said, admiring the view of the river from my living room window. "I might have to visit frequently." "You're welcome," anytime, I told her, meaning it. Her friendship had been a lifeline during the darkest days. That evening, alone in my new home, I made a decision. The house in Meadowbrook represented the last tie binding me to patterns of relationship that had proven destructive. It was time to sever that connection completely. I called Patricia. "I want to sell the house," I said without preamble. "Are you certain?" Patricia asked. "This is a significant step." "I'm certain. It's time for everyone to face the consequences of their choices." Patricia outlined the process. As majority owner, I had the legal right to force a sale. Arthur would receive 30% of the proceeds reflecting his ownership share. Given the current real estate market, the house would likely sell quickly and for more than the purchase price. "When do we start?" I asked. "I can have the paperwork ready tomorrow," Patricia replied. "Are you sure you don't want to warn Arthur first?" I thought of the note taped to my suitcase. The locks changed without notice. My bedroom converted while I was still away. No, I decided. He can receive the legal notice like I received his. With that decision, something shifted inside me. The victim narrative I had been living transformed into something else entirely, a story of reclaiming power, of boundaries established and enforced. For the first time since finding my belongings on the lawn, I slept deeply and without dreams. The next morning, I woke with purpose and clarity. The apartment felt like mine already, morning sunlight streaming through windows that needed no curtains thanks to the building's position and height. I could hear the gentle sounds of the city awakening 12 floors below traffic, beginning to flow early joggers along the riverfront path, the distant whistle of the commuter train. At 9 exactly, I called Marianne Levitt, the top realtor in Meadowbrook. Her reputation for quick above-asking price sales had made her a household name in the area. "Mrs. Williams, what can I do for you today?" Marianne's voice was warm, professional. "I'd like to list my house for sale immediately." "Wonderful. Let's schedule a time to tour the property and discuss your goals." "There's something you should know." I explained my unique situation and ownership arrangement. To her credit, Marianne adapted quickly. "I see. So we'd be listing without the current occupant's prior knowledge or cooperation. That's unusual, but not impossible given your ownership majority." We settled on an aggressive listing price 15% above recent comparable sales in the neighborhood. Given the current seller's market and the house's desirable location, Marianne felt confident we could justify the premium. "I can have a photographer there tomorrow. The occupants will need to accommodate the shoot, of course. They'll receive formal notice today." I assured her, a small part of me anticipating their reaction with what might be described as righteous satisfaction. Patricia had prepared all necessary legal documents. The notice of intent to sell would be delivered by courier that afternoon, along with a formal letter explaining my majority ownership and the legal requirements moving forward. Arthur and Diane would have 30 days to either purchase my share at current market valuation or vacate the premises to allow for proper staging and showing. At 2:15, my phone rang. Arthur's number. I let it go to voicemail, listening, as he left an increasingly frantic message. "Mom, there's been some mistake. We just got legal papers saying you're selling the house, and something about you owning 70%. That can't be right. Call me back immediately." 3 more calls followed in quick succession, each voicemail more urgent than the last. At 4:30, I finally answered. "Arthur." "Mom, what is going on? These papers say you're selling our house and claiming you own most of it. This has to be a mistake." "It's not a mistake, Arthur. When we purchased the house, I structured the agreement so that my substantial contribution gave me 70% ownership. You own 30%. As majority owner, I have the right to sell the property." The silence on the other end stretched until I wondered if the call had dropped. "That's not possible," he finally said, his voice small. "We had an agreement. You would live with us. The money was a gift to help with the down payment. We had a verbal agreement that I would always have a place to live in that house," I corrected. "You broke that agreement when you put my belongings on the lawn and changed the locks." "But Mom, that was different. It was an emergency with Diane's parents. We didn't have a choice. And I don't have a choice now, Arthur. I need to secure my financial future, since I can no longer count on having a home with you." In the background, I could hear Diane's voice rising in agitation, demanding to know what was happening. Then she was on the phone. "Randy, you cannot do this. We have a life here. My parents have nowhere else to go. I understand the difficulty, I said, keeping my voice level. You have 30 days to either buy my share of the house or find alternative accommodation. We don't have that kind of money, Diane's voice cracked with panic. To buy 70% of the house at current values, it's impossible. I understand, I repeated. Then you'll need to prepare to move. The realtor will be sending a photographer tomorrow. Please make sure the house is presentable. More shouting in the background, Gregory's distinctive voice now joining the chaos. This isn't legal, Diane insisted. We'll fight this. You're welcome to consult an attorney, I said calmly, but the paperwork is in order. Patricia made sure of that when we purchased the house. Arthur came back on the line. Mom, please, can't we talk about this? There must be another solution. I'm open to discussion, I allowed. You can call my attorney to arrange a meeting. After hanging up, I felt strangely calm. Not joyful at their distress, but not regretful either. For too long I had accepted treatment that diminished my worth. This wasn't revenge, but a necessary recalibration of respect and consequences. My phone continued ringing throughout the evening, Diane's parents calling from their phone, Diane leaving tearful voicemails, Arthur texting increasingly desperate messages. I responded to none of them, secure in the knowledge that all legal requirements were being followed. The next morning I had just returned from a walk along the riverfront when my building's concierge called up. Mrs. Williams, there's an Arthur Williams here insisting on seeing you. He says he's your son. So he had discovered my new address. Not surprising given that property ownership records were public. You can send him up, I decided. It was time to face this directly. Arthur looked disheveled when I opened my door as if he hadn't slept. His eyes widened as he took in the apartment. You have a place. All this time you had your own apartment. I gestured for him to enter. I've owned this property for 8 years. It was an investment. He walked in slowly, taking in the spacious layout, the quality finishes, the stunning river view. Why didn't you tell us? Why did you let us think you were homeless? Would it have changed your decision to put my belongings on the lawn? To change the locks before I returned home? He had the grace to look ashamed. We panicked. Diane's parents showed up with all their belongings, saying they had nowhere to go. The retirement community investment was a scam. They lost almost everything. And your solution was to make me homeless. Without warning. Without even a conversation. I knew you'd be upset. I couldn't face telling you directly. So you left me a note. On the lawn, in the rain. Arthur sank onto my sofa, head in his hands. I know how it sounds. It was wrong. Yes, it was. Before we could continue, the concierge called again. Mrs. Williams, there are 3 more people here insisting on coming up. A woman who says she's your daughter-in-law and an older couple. Arthur looked up alarmed. They followed me. Send them up, I told the concierge. This confrontation might as well include all parties. Minutes later, Diane burst through my door without knocking her parents close behind. Her eyes, red-rimmed from crying, grew round as she took in the apartment. You have this, and you're forcing us out of our home, she practically shouted. How selfish can you be? Gregory stepped forward, his imposing height meant to intimidate. Young lady, you had no right to mislead everyone about your financial situation, pretending to need our son-in-law's help when you had this luxury apartment all along. I remained standing back, straight, voice steady. I never misled anyone. I chose to help my son purchase a home he couldn't otherwise afford. I chose to live with him, to be part of his daily life. Those were gifts freely given, not obligations to be discarded when inconvenient. Helen, normally quiet in family conflicts, spoke up. But what about us? Where will we go if you sell the house? The same question I faced when I found my belongings on the lawn, I pointed out. You'll need to find alternative housing. We could all live together, Arthur suggested desperately. You could move back in. We'll make room. Too late. The suggestion that might have been welcome a month ago now rang hollow. No, Arthur. That arrangement is no longer viable. Then we'll buy you out, Diane declared. Whatever it takes. The current market value of my 70% share is approximately $595,000, I informed them. Patricia has the exact figures. Diane's face fell. That's impossible. "We don't have that kind of money." "Then the house will sell and you'll receive 30% of the proceeds, approximately $255,000, enough for a down payment on something more modest." Gregory turned on Arthur and Diane. "You told us you owned that house. You never said Randy was the majority owner." "We didn't know," Diane protested, tears flowing freely now. "She tricked us." "No," I corrected firmly. "I protected myself while still helping my son. Arthur signed all the paperwork. He simply didn't read it carefully or ask questions." The confrontation continued for another hour, cycling through anger, bargaining tears, and finally a grudging acceptance of reality. They left with the understanding that the house would be photographed the following day and officially listed by week's end. As I closed the door behind them, I felt no triumph, only a weary relief that boundaries had finally been established. I was not responsible for solving their housing crisis. I was responsible only for securing my own future with the resources I had carefully stewarded. The house went on the market Friday. By Monday, we had 7 offers, all above asking price. By the following Friday, we had accepted an offer 20% above the original listing, with minimal contingencies and a 45-day close. Arthur called only once during this time, his voice subdued. "We found an apartment to rent until we figure things out. Diane's parents are moving in with her brother in Ohio." "I'm glad you have a plan," I said sincerely. "Mom," his voice caught. "I'm sorry. I know that doesn't fix anything, but I am sorry. A beginning, perhaps. Not forgiveness, not yet, but an acknowledgement of wrong that opened the possibility of a different relationship in the future." "Thank you for saying that, Arthur. It matters." The house closed 42 days later without complications. Arthur and Diane received their 30% share as agreed, enough to secure a smaller home in a neighboring community. Diane's parents moved to Ohio as planned. Their financial situation eventually stabilized through a combination of part-time work and family support. My 70% share, combined with savings and my teacher's pension, ensured financial security for my remaining years. More importantly, the downtown apartment became a true home, reflecting my personality and interests in ways the bedroom in Arthur's house never could. I planted herbs in containers on my balcony. I took an oil painting class at the community center across the street, discovering a talent I never knew I possessed. I volunteered as a docent at the City Art Museum, sharing my newfound knowledge with visitors of all ages. I made friends in my building, a diverse mix of professionals and active retirees who organized weekly game nights and monthly book discussions. In short, I built a life of my own creation, not defined by my role as mother, widow, or guest in someone else's home. Arthur reached out periodically, tentative texts at first, then occasional phone calls. 3 months after the house sale, he asked if we could meet for coffee. We chose a cafe midway between our new homes. Arthur arrived early, visibly nervous, fiddling with his napkin as I approached. "You look great, Mom," he said, and seemed to mean it. "The new haircut suits you." We talked carefully at first, avoiding the painful subject of our estrangement. He told me about his new job, a promotion that came with the move. I shared stories about my painting class, showing him pictures of my first completed landscape on my phone. Finally, after an hour of pleasant but superficial conversation, Arthur addressed the elephant in the room. "I've been seeing a therapist," he said quietly, "trying to understand why I treated you the way I did. How I could have done something so callous to my own mother." I waited, giving him space to continue. "She's helping me see patterns in my life. How I've always taken your support for granted, expected you to sacrifice without complaint." He met my eyes directly. "I've been a selfish son, and I'm truly sorry." The apology, clearly heartfelt, unlocked something in my chest. Not full forgiveness, perhaps, but the beginning of healing. "Thank you, Arthur. That means a lot to me. I don't expect things to go back to how they were," he continued, "but I hope over time we can build something new, something better." We established cautious boundaries: coffee meetings once a month, short phone calls weekly, a slow rebuilding of trust through consistent, respectful interaction. Diane remained distant, her pride still wounded by the forced move and the revelation of my financial resources. I accepted her absence from our meetings, understanding that some relationships might never be repaired. 6 months after moving into my apartment, I joined a support group for parents experiencing family estrangement. Their stories of betrayal, heartbreak, and resilience mirrored my own. Together we explored the complex emotions of parental love, the instinct to protect and provide, even when adult children make painful choices. The hardest lesson our group facilitator often said is learning that loving your child doesn't mean accepting mistreatment. Setting boundaries isn't withdrawing love. It's teaching others how to love you properly. 1 year after finding my belongings on the lawn, Arthur asked if he could bring his wife to our monthly coffee meeting. Diane arrived with a stiff smile but made a visible effort at reconciliation. "Your apartment looks beautiful in the photos Arthur showed me," she offered awkwardly. "The river view must be amazing." A small olive branch, which I accepted with grace. "You're both welcome to visit sometime if you'd like." 2 weeks later they did. The visit was brief conversations, careful, but without the raw tension of earlier encounters. A new tradition began, monthly family dinners alternating between our homes. Not always comfortable, not fully healed, but a path forward none of us had imagined possible in the dark days of our separation. What have I learned through this painful journey? That it's never too late to stand up for yourself. That sacrificial love without boundaries benefits no one, teaching our children they can take without giving, that relationships are transactions rather than sacred connections. I learned that starting over at 68 isn't a tragedy but an opportunity. That new friendships can be as meaningful as lifelong ones. That talents and passions dormant for decades can blossom in the right conditions. Most importantly, I learned that self-respect is not selfishness. That my worth isn't determined by my usefulness to others. That unconditional love for my child doesn't mean accepting conditional love in return. Today, as I paint by my riverside window, I feel a peace I hadn't known in years. The journey from betrayal to rebuilding wasn't easy. There were days of doubt, of grief, of questioning every decision. But through it all, I discovered a strength I had forgotten I possessed. If you're watching this and facing your own family heartbreak, know this. Your story isn't over. The painful chapter you're living through now is just that, a chapter, not the entire book. You have the courage to write what comes next. I'd love to hear your stories of family challenges and how you overcame them. Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with loved ones? How did you find the strength to stand up for yourself? Please share in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, like and subscribe to hear more journeys of trauma, resilience, and renewal. Remember to share with someone who might need this message today. Thank you for listening to my story, and may you find the courage to write beautiful new chapters in your own.